Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're Horiyot daf Yud Gimel. We're going to begin on the bottom of Yud Beis and Beis by the new Mishnah. Says the Mastis. Kol hatadir mechaver koidim es chaveroi. Anything in which comes more often, we always will say that takes precedence. So in other words, if you have two things that are in front of you, so we do that which is more common. And the famous Gemara in Brachos discusses, let's say you have Tfilos Musaf and Mincha, which let's say it's at the same time that it falls out. So in that case, you're supposed to have a Mincha first because Tada V'Shenu Tada Tada Kodem. So that's the source from this Mishnah. We'll see where. Anything which has a higher level of sanctity also comes first. So Par Mashiach u Par Ha'eda Oimdim. So let's say you have the Par Mashiach, which the Kohen Gadol brings if he again makes the mistake. He's mechuyat to bring a par, as well as the Par Ha'eda in when the Bnei Yisrael sin, or again it's talking about the Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibor. So Par HaMashiach Koidim LaPar Ha'eda B'chol Masav. So we say that the Kohen Gadol's comes before everyone else. Doesn't really explain why, but again, it's logical because, as we just said, because we're dealing with a Kohen Gadol. So how do we know this notion of basically Tader V'Shenu Tader? So I'm Rabbi the Yamar Kra Milvad Oilas Habayker Shelas HaTamid, which we say famously every Rosh Chodesh. So Michti Ksiv Oilas Boiker. It always says that we bring an Ola in the morning. So Oilas Tamid Lamali. So why does it mention Oilas Tamid? Called the Tadira Kadma. So it's saying that in addition to the Oilas Haboiker, Asher Oilas Hatamid, because it comes so often, that's why we bring that before the special carbon for Rosh Chodesh. Okay. So that's an interesting way of reading it. And then the Gemara says the V'chol B'Kodesh B'Chaveru Hu Koidim Es Chaveru. So Minan, how do we know that? The Tana Rabbi Shmuel, it says V'Kidashtai. So the entirety of the pasuk is V'Kidashto Ki Es Lechem El Kechu Makriv Kodesh Elach Ki Kodesh Et Hashem Mekadishchem. So Chol Davar Shem Kedusha L'Iftoyach Rishon. So it's referring to the Kohen regarding all matters. He should go first, namely to get an aliyah first, likros b'Torah, uvarach rishon. When it comes to mezumin, the kohen should be the one that goes. V'litul money yafa rishon, also to get the finest or first portion. Okay, so then we said, what happens? We have a par kohen meshuach upar eda v'chulu. So as we continue, give them an aleph. So min hanimilis. So how do we know that? The Tanabanan. The pasuk says. As a par and they take the par outside the saraf oiso and it gets burned. Kasher saraf as a par harishon, just like the first one, chatas akahal hu. So we take the sibor one, kasher saraf as a par harishon, just like the original one, which is referring to the par mashiach. So matam harishon she harishon kaidam par ha'eda b'chol masav. It's telling you that when we have the par of the Mashiach, of the Kohen Gadol, that one comes first. Tanaban. Par Kohen Mashiach, let's say again you have, as we said, the par Kohen Mashiach, the par Ha'eda Oimdim, so they're in front of us. So as we said, par Kohen Mashiach, Koidim par Ha'eda B'chol Masav. So that we said. Why? Hoyel Mashiach Mechaper. So the reason is because the Kohen Gadol is someone who's involved in Kapara. The Eidim is Chaperes, and they're the ones that achieve Kapara. So Dinhu Shiatim Ha-mechaper le-mischaper. That it makes sense that the atoner should be before the atonee. You can see this order that first it mentions that there's a kapar for him, then only later Klal Yisrael. Okay. Par Elam Davar Shel Tzibor. When it comes to Par Elam Davar Shel Tzibor, which is, as we saw in the beginning of this Masechta, not too long ago, that when the Beis Din airs and there's based on erroneous psak, and in turn the tzibor, the majority, violates. So in that case, and it was al das Beis Din, So in that case, the Beis Din has to bring a par, according to some opinions. It's a machlokus, if only the Beis Din does, or not the Beis Din, or the Tzibor, but nonetheless, let's just keep it simple. So we say that's kaidem l'par shel avodas kachavim. So that comes before, if the erred regarding having to worshiping idols. As we said, maybe it's referring to about bowing down, and that's a matter which Sadukim are not moedim by. Namely, if it's something in which is not the norm for bowing to that particular type of an idol. So my time haichatas vai oila, because in general, when we have a chatas and oil in front of us, we generally will bring the chatas first, and then only afterwards the oil. So the par of the Ovenes Kachavim, and there's a par and a sa'ir, but the par of the Ovenes Kachavim is an oila. So therefore, we bring the chatas before an oila, and therefore that's why the par of Devar Shel Tzibur, which is a chatas, is done. But Tanya, the hikrev es asher lachatas rishayna. Matamonomer imel mam shehi chatas rishayna harkvar nemar. We already know that the par Mashiach comes first. Ves hasheni yasa oila kamishpat. This is the second one, should be just like the original one. This is come to tell you that when it comes to a situation where we have a chatas and an oila, we bring the chatas first. Kol chatas kodemus oilos haboyim imahem. V'karmelon diafil chatas oiv kodemus oilos behema. So you would think maybe that's only if there's similar types of karbanos. However, the ola is a more chashav, a behema, and the ola is a lowly bird, that maybe in that case you would think that you should bring an ola. No, you still bring the chatzim before the oila. Par avodas kachavim. So again, when it comes to the par avodas kachavim, we'll still say it's kaidem l'sa'ir avodas kachavim. As I said, interestingly enough, even though it's true, as we said, when there's a conflict between the par helm which is the chatos, and the par of the Ovenes Kachavim, which is an oila, so therefore we bring the chatas for the oil. But over here, interestingly enough, in this situation, we will, even though we normally bring the chatas before the ola, here we're going to bring the par before the sa'ir. Now, even though, again, as we said, the par for avodah zara, again, they're making a mistake thinking that certain avodah zara is allowed or whatever, and we ended up doing so. So that's an oila, and the sa'ir is a chatas. Nonetheless, the par of his kachavim is kaidem l'sir of his kachavim. So my haichatas l'hayoyle. It shouldn't be that way. You should bring the sa'ir first. So Amri Rava Mishmid Rava Barmari chatas of his kachavim chasera aleph. So interesting. If you look at the pasuk over there, it actually is written without an aleph. The chatas ksiv. It's actually written without the letter aleph. So let's see, does it say it over here? So v'haya ime'eni ha'eda nesel l'shkog v'yasa kol eda par ben bakar echad l'oil l'reich nechayach min l'chazon niska kamishu sir izim echad l'chatos. So first of all, you could say pashit, that if you read the pasuk, it first the Gzeres HaKasav tells you that first you bring a par ben bakar echad l'oila. It says beferish the oila, right? The pasuk says that the oila is first. I mean, maybe you don't have to read it in the order of the pasuk. So why does the pasuk write it in that way? Then the chatas. So maybe the reason, again, the fact that it writes it without an aleph is to show us that no, this is dafka how it's supposed to be done in this particular order. Which again, it's interesting. Again, the pasuk really is, it's a kasav to say so, but nonetheless, we still need that aleph. Rabbi Omer kamishbak sibei seir but it's chachavim koydem asir nasi. Okay, kamishbak sibei says Rashi, but part of it is chachavim the basuk siva azlina. We go after the pasuk. V'aybereshik siva. And it's again, it seems pretty obvious because that's the way it's actually written in the pasuk, which is how we're interpreting it over here. Okay, fine. So let's keep going. So that's what you're supposed to do when it comes to the chavim. First, you bring the par, even though that's an oil. Then the sa'ir, even though it's a chatos. Okay. Now, what happens if you have a sirvanas chavim? You have the sa'ir, which again is a chatos of avodah zarah. It's kaidem l'sir nasi. interesting enough, that will come before the sa'ir of a nasi, of a king. So my taima, ha'tzibra ha'yachid. Because again, what is being brought? Why are we bringing this par in the sa'ir for Avodah Zarah? We're bringing it because it was a mistake of the masses. So that's the tzibor, and even though obviously a king is important, but the tzibor is more important. Sir nasi kodem l'siris yachid. But of course, a king is more chashuv than a yachid. My time hay melech v'hay hedget. Seiris yachid, when it comes to a she goat, in which is a yachid, because you can bring a seira or a kisva. So if you brought a she goat, that's koidemis l'kaiveses. If someone else wanted to bring yachid wanted to bring a she lamb, so a she goat comes before a she lamb. V'atanya kiveses yachid kodemis l'seiras yachid. We heard the opposite. So Rabbi tonight it's actually machokas. Why would a seira be before the kivasa? Is shekain nisravta eitzav chachamim, because you can't bring a kivsa when it comes biyachid. A yachid avodah zarah cannot bring a kivasa, right? It has to come from a sa'ir. It's a sa'ira, so it can't. It's a goat. So therefore, it must be that there's something more chashiv about a sa'ir, a goat, than a sheep. Marsaver kavasa difa shekain nisravta ba'alya. On the other hand, when it comes to a kavasa, there is something chashiv about it because the fatty tail is also on the mizbeach. Okay, so fine. Oimer koidim lekeves. So when it comes to the oimer, and does Rashi help me out over here? This is before the minchas oimer comes before the keves, which the sheep that are brought together with the offering, haba imoy, that comes with it. Now on Shavuos we bring the two breads, and we also bring two kvasim. But you bring the breads before the kvasim. Haba imahem zeklal. Davar haba begin leyoim koydem ledavar haba begin lechem. Something which is due today comes before something which comes like bread. So what is Rashi says? Begin yoim, beglal yoim. Because of this, keves glal oimer. The keves comes because of the oimer. The kvasim beglal shtei lechem. So what's unique about the Shavuos is the shtei halechem. So because of the shtei lechem, so then we also bring kvasim. So the shtei lechem is more important. And the oimer on Pesach, the barley offering, that is something in which is unique. And therefore, when we bring the karbanos together with it, it accompanies it, so therefore it shows which one is like the specialty, and therefore that's why that comes first. Okay, let's maybe see a question. Okay, question 11. How do we know that? Because it says v'kidashtoi. That's what we see when it comes to a kohen, that's what we do. How do we find that an oila comes first in general? That an oila, where do we ever find it? Because typically a chatas comes before an oila. However, when it comes to when it comes to the carbon that for avodah zarah, so the par comes before the sa'ir, even though the par is an oila and the sir is a chatas. It writes ayin zvachim stadium and beis dehu adin ber karbanos achag. So the din also by karbanos achag. That's the din. Okay, we'll have to get to that in about 3 months. Okay, that was question 12. Let's see, maybe we have another question here. TA 10 Chacham Melech. Okay, we didn't do that one yet. Question TB 12. Kisa o seira haminayu koidim. So it's a machlokas, right? It's one way or the other. In Umatam. Okay, all right, this is completely wrong. So, maybe I got one of them right, but maybe the kisva, because of its tail is we're makriv that al hamizbeach, right? So that's more chashiv, or because maybe I actually did write this because of seira hu avodah zara. Actually, that is correct. Okay, because the seir avodah zara. So therefore, because of that, let me just write this. The seira comes first. Okay. So I'm going to machlokas. All right. Okay. That's TB12. So let's find this over here. TB12. So Mar Savar Seira Difa Shachin Nisrabta Eitzav Chachavim B'Yochid. Mar Savar Kisa Difa Shachin Nisrabta B'Aliyah. Okay, not so easy, these questions. You have to remember a lot of information. Okay, let's get to the next Mishnah. Beautiful Mishnayos at this end of some Masechta. Says the Masdisen, Ha'ish Kaidim L'Isha L'Hachyois L'Heshav Aveda. So when you have a man and a woman that have the need for sustenance or to return a lost object, for some reason that give that to the man first. However, Isha kodemus ish l'ksus l'hoitzi bebeis hashevi. So if a woman is in captivity, right, or like in Titanic, or I guess maybe it's the same, not maybe that's an example, when a woman is in dire straits, so we save the women come first, right? So especially in captivity where they can be violated, and also to make sure that they have proper clothing so that they're not unclothed. Now, let's say they're both standing in some danger of tashmish, says Rashi, ish l'mishkav zachar, that a man could be violated by another man. So then we're going to save the man first, because this is an unnatural way for this man to be violated, as opposed to, of course, it's just terrible, a woman being violated, but it's not as devastating as a man being violated by another man. It says the Gemara, talking about Nahaya Huv Aviv Rabo Bishevi. Let's say you have yourself, your father, and your teacher in captivity. So who could live night? Rabbi, you come first. But your teacher comes before your father. But your mother comes before all of them. Says Rashi, because it's more disgraceful for your mom. If you're in captivity, so a chacham will come even before a king. Chacham shemes ein lo kiyotzevo, because when it comes to someone who has wisdom, there's no one that can be replaced. Replace that wisdom. Melech Yisrael shemes kol Yisrael ruin l'malchos. A king, okay, anyone can be a king, okay? So we'll replace him. Wisdom is more irreplaceable than being a king. Unbelievable. Melech koydem kohen gadol, a king comes before the high priest. Shenemar, because the pasuk says, "V'yomer hamelech lahem kachu yimochem avdi adonechem v'gomer." So this pasuk, let's see what this pasuk is in Malachim Aleph. So it says, "V'yomer hamelech lahem," the king said, "Take from you the avdi adonechem, the masters of your servants of your masters, your kavtim is shloimoi b'ni, and let my son Shlomo ride. I'll appear shirli on my mule. Barad tamoiso el gichain, and let him go to gichain." I'm assuming is that the right pasuk? Maybe. The kohen gadol koydem l'navi. Kohen gadol comes before a navi. Shnemar, because the pasuk says umashach oisoi sham tzaddik kohen, that he was anointed. V'nasan hanavi Melech Yisrael, Skatim Meshayit Meir, Ramartim Yechia, Melech Shlomo. So we see from here that Kohen Gadol is even greater than a Navi, because there's a Moshe Chososham that he was anointed. V'nasan Hanavi, fine. V'nasan Hanavi hikdim Sadak L'nasan. And what did he do? He was hikdim Sadak L'nasan. He put Sid in this pasuk Sadak HaKayin before the Navi, before Nasan Hanavi. First it says Sadak HaKayin, then it says Nasan Hanavi. So it must be that let's get this again, that the Kohen Gadol comes before the Nasi, because that's what the Navi, because that's what the pasuk says. Okay. Nasan the Navi hikdim Sadagon Kohen. Nasan. The Omer, and furthermore it says Shema na Yehoshua Kohen Gadol. It mentions about Yoshua the Kohen Gadol. Ata b'royecha v'goymer. So Yochol hedyotos hayu. You would think they're hedyotos, his friends. Talmud loimer ki anshi meifes hema, they're men of wonder. In meifes el navi shnemer v'nasan alecha oiso meifes. So he's actually referring to Nevi'im, and again we see that he's greater than a Navi. Mashuach Mashem Misha Koydem Amruba Begadim. The one who was anointed with oils, in which before the times of Yeshaya, when it was hidden, I'll say in times of the first base of Mikdash, times of Moshe Rabbeinu, when they had this oil, so that comes first, even before another Kohen Gadol, who is merely a Meruba Begadim. Meruba Begadim Koydem Mashiach She'avar Machmas Kerio. But the Meruba Begadim is better than the Kohen Gadol who was removed because he was a Baal Keri. Mashiach She'avar Machmas Kiri Koydem Avar Machmas Mumoi. Better than someone who has a blemish, which is something which is more permanent. Avar Machmas Mumoi Koydem Mashuach Melchama. But even he is better than the Kohen Gadol who comes out just for war, to influence the troops. Mashuach Melchama Koydem Sagan. He's better than the deputy Kohen Gadol. Sagan Koydem Arm Kal. So my arm Kal, what exactly is that? So on this, Gemara says Amar Chisda Amar Kula. He says everything in the Beis HaMikdash. Like he's basically in charge. Says Rashi, Shimamoina al Kulam ve'ein mashiven al davarav. Right. So basically, he's in charge. Amar Kal, like Omar Kol, Koydem Gizber. He's head of the treasure. Gizber Koydem Rosh Mishmor, and head of the guards. Rosh Mishmor Koydem Rosh Beis Av. Rosh Beis Av, which again, he's the one who's in charge of choosing, making sure the different weeks and the different days are all organized. Koydem Kohen Hedget. Iboilhu. Inyan Tuma, regarding the name of impurity, Segam Mashoch Machama is Mehem Koydem. What comes first? So that had to do with like if they're in captivity. But what happens if you have a deputy Kohen Gadol and one who is anointed in oil? So which one's first? So Omer Amar Zutra B'Redu Rab Nachman Tashma Tanya Segan Mashoch Melchama. When you're comparing these two people, Shohayu Mahalchim Aderech, they're traveling, Apag Behem Meis Mitzvah, and they chance upon a Meis Mitzvah. Mutav Sheyatam Mashoch Melchama. Let the Mashoch Melchama be the one who becomes Tameh. Val Yatam Segan, because Sheim Yirabo Psul B'Kohen Gadol Nichnas Segan Meshamish Tachtav. So he was the person, just in case the Kohen Gadol became Tameh, was unfit, let's say, for the Avodah of Yom Kippur, so he had to have this person to take over his place. So he's very important, so he shouldn't get Tameh. So Ravina Kitan Yahi Lach Yoisai. In order for him sticking around being alive, so then he's before the Sagan. Because war, which obviously, him influencing people in a positive direction is extremely, extremely important, and therefore that's something in which we want him to be alive for. Okay. But in Tuma, we'll say that we'd rather the Sagan because we don't want him to become Tameh. Says next Mishnah. Says Maslitzin, Kohen Koydem Levi, right? So you have a Kohen Levi in Yisrael. So Kohen comes before Levi Yisrael. I don't feel so bad. I'm a Yisrael, but okay, there are people ahead of me. Yisrael will mamzer or mamzel nisin, who are from the Givoinim. They became water carriers. They tricked our leadership into thinking that they came from a faraway place. When Nasan Leger, the ger oivik le'evin b'shochar, a freed slave. So Hemosab is much like Hom. The only time we say that one is more important than the other, one should be saved more than the other, one we should help more than the other, is only if they're of equal stature. And this is an unbelievably very important line. If you have a guy who mamish comes from the worst background, he's a mamzer, so his parents created him in a horrible way. But you have a Kohen Gadol who's Amars, but he's literally the Kohen Gadol. Mamzer Talmid Chacham Kaidem L'Kohen Gadol Am Haaretz. We show more respect and we'll do more and help out that individual, because even though it's true, he doesn't come from the best background, he's a mamzer, we don't care as much about that. We care about what he became, what he built himself to become. And now the fact that he's a Chacham and a Talmid Chacham, we show him greater respect than even a Kohen Gadol if he was someone who is unlearned. Says the Gemara, Kohen is Kaidem Levi Shenemar B'nei Amram Aharon U'Moshe. So the children of Amram was Aharon and Moshe. V'yavdel Aaron l'hakiv l'akdishu kodesh kadoshim. So why is Aaron mentioned first? Because Aaron was a Kohen, and Moshe, who came from Shevet Levi, he was a Levi. Levi kodem Yisrael shenemar be'esahi hivdol Hashem as Shevet Levi. Hashem separated them mitayich l'kal b'gamer. Yisrael kodem mamzer shezeh meyuchas zeh meyuchas. Right? So it's a mamzer, it's not meyuchas. So obviously he doesn't come before a regular Jew. Mamzer kodem on the sin zeba metipuk sher zeba metipuk psula. At least the mamzer he came from metipuk shera. However, the Nesinim did not. Okay, we don't have any Rashi on that. Nesin kadam ger ze gadol imanu b'kedusha, ze lo gadol imanu b'kedusha, because they weren't born Jewish; they only became Jewish by choice, which is also obviously very commendable. Ger kaidim lo eved meshucher ze hay b'chal or ze lo hay b'chal or. We say that the curse is a klola on an eved meshucher, but not on a ger. So Amos is much called Shavim Minhan V'chulu Minhan Miliam Rav Acha Beredu Chinin. The pasuk says in Mishlei Yikarahi Mipninim B'chol Chafatzecha L'Yishavah. Did I quote the right pasuk? Yikarahi Mipnimim, that the Torah is more precious than pearls. That's the idea. Even greater than the Kohen Gadol who enters into the base, into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And everyone should come before the ger. Because the Eved Meshucha was Gadol b'Kedusha. So why does the ger come first? We go basser the curse. Shol Tamid of Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Sod. He asked a question. The Ein Hakol Ratzin Lisa Mishachareres. Why is it that when it comes to marriage, people are happy to go and marry a convert, but not so much a slave that became freed? So Amalahem Zu Hoysa B'Chlal Or Zu Lo Hoysa B'Chlal Or, because this a Gyaris is not cursed. However, the others are, the Mishachareres is. Davar Acher, another interpretation, Zu Hoysa B'Chesches Shomer Zu Lo Hoysa B'Chesches Shomer. Says Rashi, the Hasam Shivcha Muvkeres. When it comes to a Shivcha, she's like Hefker. Loshan Acher Gyaris Boilegure Mishameres Atzmo. She was like protecting herself, because she wants to become righteous. She wanted to convert, obviously because she converted, so she was very careful even then. To become free, it's not up to you. You have to be redeemed. Your master has to free you. So therefore, it has a different mindset. Why is a dog man's best friend, but cats not so much? So so they eat from what a mouse ate from, and it forgets its learning, if you will. So it's the mouse itself. When it eats from the mouse itself, then all the more so. So basically, a rat or a mouse is a detestable animal, and basically, since cats go after those things, that's what causes it not to really connect emotionally to its owners like a dog. Okay, it's hard to understand what that means, but that's the idea. Why does every creature chase after the mouse? Because its nature is bad. Mahi, what's so bad about a mouse or rat? Rabbi Omer afilu gulimi gaitzi, even garments, says Rashi, noishchin, they bite and make holes in garments in which they don't get any benefit from it anyway, and they just rip things apart. Rapapa Omer afilu shufta moragaitzi, even the handles of different tools they rip apart. They're biting and ripping things, and they're not obviously eating it. So because of that, they're like considered to be a detestable creature. Tanubanan, chamish davarim nimshachim. So actually, before let's look at question 13. Ha'ish va'isha mi mehem kaidem lachayos l'shavas navedo chsus l'haitzis mebeis hashevi. So that's actually nice. So it's written in order. So l'hachayos and shavas navedo goes to the man. Chsus and l'haitzis mebeis hashevi goes to the woman. Okay. So Tanaban, chamisha devarim mishachenes haliman. 5 things will cause a person to forget their learning. Ha'oichel mamasha oichel achbar. If you eat what a mouse eats, umasha oichel chatul, or whatever a cat eats. Ha'oichel leiv shel behem. If you eat the heart of an animal. V'hirgo bezesim. If you eat olives. V'shoisa mayim shel shiuri rechitza. If you drink water which is left over from bathing. V'roichetz raglav zu agav zu. If you wash your feet literally one on the other. So too, if you put your clothes under your head, right, while you're sleeping, to fall asleep, like you put all your clothes there. So that's what it's referring to. Fine. There's 5 things that can restore your learning. Pas pechamin. You have bread, which is on coals. V'koshkin b'chamim atzman, coals themselves, like going to a sauna. V'oichel beitzim v'golgelos b'loy melech. If you eat an egg without salt. V'hirgol b'shemen zayis. So olives are bad for your memory. Olive oil is very good for your memory. And some of the Mefarshim explain is, what is an olive? Olive has all of its oil in it. Olive oil, the oil came out of it, right? So it's the same thing. If you have knowledge and you keep it to yourself, thinking that that's a way to retain your knowledge, that's a way you're going to forget. But that's like an olive. If instead you're like olive oil that you extract, you allow it to come out, then you're going to be more likely to retain it. The hirgo biyayin, someone who's accustomed to drinking wine, and someone drinks the water from the leftover of kneading. You dip your finger into salt and eat it. Here goes shemen zayis. So also olive oil, as we said. Why? So Messiah Rabbi Yochanan, it's a proof. Olives can cause you to forget even for 70 years. So olive oil can do the opposite. Question 14. Shisha Devarim. Tell me these 4 things that cause you to forget your learning. So one is one who eats what a mouse eats, or a cat. Someone who eats the heart of an animal. One who eats olives. One who drinks the leftover from bathing. One who literally washes his feet one by the other. Exactly what that means is a good question. Or he puts his clothes underneath his head. Okay, when he sleeps. Here go bain biyayin v'samim. So my Messiah Rabbi Diemar Rabba Chamra v'richani pikchin. Wine and fragrant smells causes a person to become wise. V'toivel etzbo b'melach. You dip your fingers into salt is good. So Amrish Lakish uva achas, 1 finger. Kitada. Rabbi Yehuda Omer achas l'shtayim, 1 and not 2. Rabbi Yossi Omer shtayim l'sholish. I sound like the vote on Yom Kippur. 2 and not 3. V'simanech kamitza. And the sign is kamitza, because kamitza we actually do like this. We use 3 fingers. Okay, so that's a way to remember it. Okay. Says Rashi, "Lakachta he zocher she'achas oimer achas l'shtayim, echad oimer shtayim v'shalosh goydel loy kachoshev hacha." But the thumb is not mentioned among the other fingers. Mishum deloy koi b'tzeder etzba'is. So again, we don't use the thumb. It's not referring to dipping with your thumb like kamitza. Because kamitza, you don't use your thumb. You use the inside fingers. Okay. So I guess that's a way to remember that. Asar devarim kashim limoy. There's 10 things which are detrimental for learning. Ha'over tachas ha'afsar hagamal. Someone who passes underneath the halter of a camel. Obviously, it's hard to understand the significance of this. And v'koshkein tachas gamal atzmo. If you go underneath a camel, not a good idea, especially if it sits down you. However, bein shnei gamalim, you pass between two camels. However, bein shnei noshim, you pass between two women. Va'isha heveris bein shnei anoshim, a woman who passes between two men. However, mitachas reach ra shel nevelo, someone who passes by a foul odor of a dead animal. That smell is not good for you. If you go over a bridge in which no water went over it for 40 days, if you eat bread that hasn't been properly cooked, if let's say you have this meat in which it comes from a spoon that was used to stir a pot. One who drinks water which passed a cemetery. When he stares at a dead body. Also, if you read that which is on the kever, namely a tombstone. So exactly what is the significance of why these things will cause you to lose your learning is certainly something to think about. We're going to stop there because next daf is extremely short. Let's maybe see another question over here. Let's look at TA 10. So we said a chacham comes before one second, let's say this again. Chacham umelach. Chacham koidem. The chacham shemes ein lo l'kiyos. Melech shemes klum ro'in l'malchus. Right, which is a pretty wild statement, but it's absolutely it's so true. Right, so you can always get another king, but a chacham, someone who is wise, that is irreplaceable. Okay, TB. 13. Be'ezel loshemas masler bereis the Rameir betchila be'ezel loshemas b'soif. Okay, we definitely did not do that. Adkan.